So it's the pre-season, crazy practice sessions, warm-up games, and it's your last chance to make improvements before the real season begins. It's probably the most intense time of year for athletes of any sports just because of how much work you're doing. Also means it's very easy to break yourself down before you even get into the real games, which isn't ideal. So how do we attack the preseason properly and still get better without getting hurt in the process? Well, number one is scheduling, because organization is the key. This is the time of year where you can start to implement your in-season routines for both games and training days. Everything from your warm-ups and cool-downs to your socializing and meal timings needs to be organized so that you can make the most of this last bit of time to get better. Of course, the intensity of sports training is going to increase to a level that you probably haven't been doing for a couple of months. So if you're going to try and incorporate weight room work into this, you've got to do it with some wisdom. I'd personally recommend categorizing your days by intensity, i.e. high and low intensity. I'd consider a high intensity day to be a day where you've got a conditioning session or a game, and a low intensity day would be a day where you maybe have like a shoot around or maybe no games or practice at all. So to incorporate lifting into this, I try and lift as early as possible on the high intensity day, ideally giving about 5 hours between the lifting session and then the following training session, so that you can recover as much as possible before that second session of the day. However, this might be impossible because maybe your coach is just setting your schedule that you have a morning session instead, in which case I would just flip it around and do that weight session later in the evening, but I would try and give slightly more time. So instead of 5 hours, maybe I go 6 to 8 hours in between instead, because it's very likely that your sport that you compete in at a high level is going to be way more taxing on your nervous system than a weight room session. So you want to make sure that you're not completely depleted as you go into that weight room session. Then just organize accordingly so that you're always alternating between high and low intensity days to give you enough time to recover between days. Now I'll get into the details of lifting and conditioning later in the video because I'm sure some of you are thinking, how can you do both on the same day? Number two is conditioning, because we've got to make that sport specific. So with conditioning, it's likely that your coaches are going to be quite keen to put you through your paces to make sure that you're back to match fitness and in game shape. But your coaches are also likely to be the ones that are going to get you to do all those kind of conditioning drills like interval sprints, suicides, running upstairs, etc. So you don't necessarily want to double up on that outside of your sessions. I think the easiest way to just work on your conditioning outside of those sessions is to just play your sport, but focus on your conditioning. So for example, if you're a basketball player and you go to pickup games, you want to make sure you are running every single fast break. On defense, you might want to pick up your guy full court, and on the half court sets, you might want to make all of those same kind of cuts like Steph Curry does so that you're always on the move. Or if you're a football player, then you want to make sure that every counter attack, you're going all the way. You're going to track back if you're a winger. You're going to go forward if you're a fullback. Or defensively, you're going to just try and press people or man mark someone. Just do something that adds that conditioning element to it, but within the game itself. You do want to be careful with how much you start to compete at this level, especially if you didn't do that much during the off season, because it will be a very high spike in training volume and intensity, which might just be a shock to your body and could put you at risk of more injuries. So you want to progressively introduce it back into your schedule. So if you didn't play at all in the off season, then you want to go once a week, then twice a week, 3 times, 4 times, and just increase it each week, And number 3 is lifting, and this is where we're going to have an easy strength / prehab focus. As athletes, the weight room is just a secondary supplement to help us perform in our sports, and the preseason is too short a time period to see major gains in this area anyway. So although I'm using the word lift, I don't mean like lift super heavy weights and get super sore like a bodybuilder. Instead, we want to focus on what I've heard called easy strength by Any Means Basketball, and I think that that's a really good way to phrase it. By easy strength, I personally define that as having enough time under tension to activate muscles and maintain our strength, but not so much that we're really trying to put on muscle. And trying to put on muscle during the season is difficult enough anyway because you'll burn so many calories just from playing your sport. We also want to work on sport-specific strength and power with a focus on rehab, prehab, and mobility. This could look like a 30-minute lift twice a week with some contrast sets of strength, power, and mobility movements. So for strength, we could do like a barbell bench press, but then for power, we could do a med ball toss. And then for mobility, we could perhaps do a shoulder mobility circuit with a resistance band. And if you think of like a bodybuilder who's trying to put on mass, it's unlikely you're going to see them do those other 2 types of exercises. You'll probably just see them do that barbell bench press, right? But we're still activating those muscle groups without putting them under too much load, and that way you can still go into your sport and perform. Plus we're actually working in like a powerful position as well. And then rehab and prehab work could be even shorter, so maybe like a 15 to 20 minute session before bed where you do some isometrics and maybe some added mobility work in there as well. So perhaps some wall sits or a Spanish squat and maybe some ankle full range of motion work. And because we are athletes, we are also also movers. So we want to make sure that we're moving well with different loads and we can overload different positions that we'll see in our sport. So we want to integrate movement into those lift sessions as well. So adding in different stances and different postural focuses within these exercises could also be key. So perhaps with a med ball toss, we can do it from a staggered stance. With the wall sits for isometrics, we can make sure that we focus on 3 points of contact with the wall. So our head, our shoulders, and our lower back, especially our lower back, to make sure that our hips aren't pushing forward and we're in what's called an anterior pelvic tilt, because then we're able to engage our core muscles more, and that's going to help us just move more athletically. Number 4 is recovery. Nutrition and sleep will take you a long way. The common theme with the other things that I've said is the ability to recover between sessions and games because of that spike in intensity during the preseason. A solid sleep schedule is the most simple and effective solution to this. But it's also notoriously underused by athletes of all levels, including myself still. And it's either because you're not disciplined enough to actually go to sleep on time, or it's the opposite because as athletes, we want to grind, we want to make sure we're up at 4 a.m., up before the competition. And so we just end up not getting enough sleep in the process. However, studies continue to show that sleep is such an effective tool, both for recovery and for adaptations, AKA making gains. So if we want to squeeze out that last little bit of improvements in the preseason, get some sleep. Nutrition is also the other major key player when it comes to that recovery because you cannot outtrain a bad diet. And there are, again, numerous studies showing the importance of both protein intake and carb intake when it comes to recovery and refueling for athletes. I'm sure when I use the word recovery, most of you probably immediately thought, oh, stretching, foam rolling, icing. However, these aren't long-term benefits. That's why I mentioned sleeping and nutrition first. These are more like short-term benefits. But in preseason, I do think that short-term benefits are key because, as I've been mentioning the whole time, intensity has gone up. So we want to be making sure that we're able to recover for each session because it's in such a short period and you have to go back to back to back. So those short-term benefits are good, especially if they make you feel good. So, icing, for example, doesn't necessarily have much proof for, making adaptations per se. But if it has that placebo effect of making you feel like you've recovered, then you're likely to play better in the next session or the next game. But again, there are studies showing that, these acute short-term type of recovery methods are useful. They have their time and place in the season. In the off season, you might not necessarily want to use them, but in the preseason and in season, perfectly fine. But if I had to prioritize one acute short-term method of recovery over all of the ones I've just mentioned, I would go with parasympathetic breathing. This is where you slow your heart rate down to send signals to your brain that your body needs to start its recovery processes, sending the nutrients to the muscles that have been working throughout the session so that you can start to recover. And you do this simply by breathing out for longer than you breathe in. For example, you can inhale for 5 seconds and then you exhale for 10. It's simple, time efficient, and has similar long-term benefits to the nutrition and sleep, more so than those other acute methods like foam rolling and icing. And as a bonus, you can also still work on your posture whilst you do this parasympathetic type of breathing. For example, if you lie on the floor, again, you can focus on those 3 points of contact with the floor, so you're getting a double benefit whilst you're recovering too. As you can see, the sun was setting as I was filming, so it's gotten a lot darker now, but don't mind that. Check out the description of this video for a free vertical jump workout at www.elitesmartathletes.com. If you like this breakdown, then check out the video that's about to come up on screen, all about in-season training schedules for athletes. And you might as well subscribe whilst you're at it too. But until next time, stay blessed.